Everybody, welcome to our June webinar. I am so excited to share with you Dr. Mary Lou Jepsen, a dear friend, a brilliant scientist, entrepreneur. Mary Lou, a pleasure to see you.
It's fantastic to see you. I'm a huge fan, and it's so great to be able to connect this way since we can't be in person.
So to everybody, to all my abundance community, if you don't mind, Mary Lou, who is brilliant, I'm going to introduce her properly in a second, and I are going to have a catch up, and you're going to have a chance to be part of that catch up. And especially now in the COVID-19 world and into the decade that we're living into, what you're building and the vision that you're creating is just so perfect. All right, so without further ado, let me do a proper introduction. 1 second. I know you don't want an introduction. I'm going to give it anyway. So Dr. Mary Lou Jepsen is the CEO and founder of Openwater, which is a cool name, which you cannot guess what she does unless you read, the email I sent you about our time today. Before starting Openwater, which is a company creating MRI quality medical imaging 1,000 times lower price and ultimately 1,000 times smaller in your home, it's going to be awesome. Dr. Jepsen was an executive at Facebook, at Oculus, at Google, and Intel. I mean, talk about small world-changing companies. She's designed and shipped billions of dollars worth of consumer electronics, which is why, in full disclosure, my venture fund, Bold Capital, is a proud investor in Openwater. She has had 4 startups, including one laptop per child with Nicholas Negroponte, where she was CTO, chief architect, and delivered at mass production $100 laptop. She was a professor at MIT, my alma mater, go MIT, and invented over 250 published and issued patents, one of Time's 100, CNN's top 10 thinkers, Forbes 2018 list of top 50 women in tech, and more important, an amazing human being. Mary Lou, awesome.
Thank you for the very generous introduction.
All right, so guys, here's what I'm going to give you. Here's what we're going to be talking about. Nothing less than how do we monitor your body to make medicine proactive, predictive, and personalized on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, it's when we talk about one of my favorite subjects, brain-computer interface, which is sort of like the origin of Openwater. So Mary Lou, we're in a time right now where everyone's looking to get back control of their lives, where health is more important than ever, where telemedicine is exploding onto the scene. But the problem with telemedicine right now, as we all know, is I can have a Zoom call my doctor like this. I can say, no, really, look at my arm over here. It's right here. Or I don't feel well. But until, I write about this at length, and I talk about Openwater in my last book, until we've got the sensors that are able to monitor your body in enough high resolution, wherever you are. And then we're just talking about this, the data today may go to your doctor. Very shortly, you'll want it going to your AI. We're about to revolutionize healthcare. I'm going to keep the BCI conversation for a little bit. But what's your vision of the future of at-home healthcare?
The hospitals, the brick and mortar hospitals are on their way out. It's been for a while. It's been accelerated through this crisis. 440,000 people die from infection in hospitals or medical error every year. And now that study was done in 2016 pre-COVID. And it's just, hospitals have 3 roles, right? Acute care, diagnostic, and chronic disease maintenance. I suppose you could say, like, you're doubled over in pain in the middle of the night, you can't walk, call 911, get to an urgent care facility, be it hospital or hopefully something closer. Yeah. But in terms of diagnostic and chronic disease management, what are those doing in the hospital? And in fact, what's so confusing is those 3 those three functions of the hospital have three different business models, as the famous Clayton Christensen wrote about in a book he published on this, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. And so the future of healthcare, it seems obvious. We have sensors that can look inside of us, like we have now with blood pressure cuffs and thermometers, but why not be able to see inside of your body if you have Angelina Jolie cut off part of her body because she had the BRCA gene, right? And just because the exposure to the radiation, the going for a mammogram and so forth, we're not good diagnostic tools. What if we could see something developing and solve it early? All of us have cancer all of the time, but most of us are able to overcome that with our immune system. But if we could understand how that worked, we could maybe make it work for more people, or at least cut it out early.
Let me slow that down for a second for folks, because I mean, those of you who've been on our previous webinars in the abundance community, you know this, we've talked about this. We are always developing cancers. And the beautiful thing is we have this incredible immune system that finds the cancer and kills it, knocks it out. But when it doesn't, that's when you start getting a cancer growth. And there are lots of reasons this occurs, but then your success in treating your cancer is a function of how early do you find it. Yeah. And so some of you, like me, have gone through the health nucleus down in San Diego, where you go once a year. I go get a full body MRI, my brain vasculature, my body, and so forth. And eventually I'll find something. But what if you could do that at home? Once a month.
Or in a photo booth at your local pharmacy or big box store. You put in your credit card, you go in, you don't have to talk to anybody, no people, you get your data, you own your data, right? Like we could do that. We could do that even in a photo booth or at home, whichever's easier.
And so the vision is basically imaging. So MRI is let's talk about what kind of, there's x-rays, that's 100+ year old technology. And then we created CAT scans, which also use x-rays. And then there's MRIs, typically. And so I'm going to get to the how you do it in a moment, but how is what you and your amazing team are doing compare with those two other technologies?
And there's ultrasound. So
ultrasound, yes.
Which you've seen the grainy images, they often look like a quarter of a circle and black and white.
If you have a boy or a girl or two kids in utero, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Or sometimes you get a diagnostic with them as well. So in terms of CAT scan or an MRI, we are getting to equivalent image quality, but at much lower price. And in the case of a CAT scan, your dosage, the radiation dosage of a CAT scan, a full head CAT scan, for example, is 10 millisieverts. If you have 10 of those, that's 100 millisieverts. Or an atomic bomb survivor in Hiroshima or Nagasaki level for high cancer risk.
Wow.
So there's a limit on how many CT scans you should have. So there's a radiation issue. On X-ray, it's a lot lower. CAT scan is sort of like lots of X-rays, what they call tomographically, scans around to get better pictures and then slices the images together in the software. So we're approaching the image quality. You can go look at our images from 2 months ago on our website. We're not, I'm not trying to advertise. We're not selling you anything yet. But openwater.cc is where you can see images if you hit the technology tab. And you'll see that what we are doing is better than ultrasound and rivaling MRI quality, but we're using, in my intro, they mentioned I ship a lot. I sleep on the factory floors of the world to really understand how manufacturing works. So when we invent something, we can make sure we put it into mass production. So we're using camera chips that are literally shipping 1 million units a day in every iPhone.
Amazing.
Ultrasonic chips that are coming online in silicon factories, and at volume, the cost of that ultrasound chip is the amount of area you use in the amount of volume of the silicon. And then laser diodes that are just going into production right now in Japan that are about this size. So what we've been able to do, And that seems impossible, because this idea of Moore's law being this continuous march of doubling transistor density. But what I noticed 4 years ago is we hit a big step function, a discontinuity, a big sea change in what Moore's law can do as it hits the physics. And that's that pixel sizes in camera chips are now approximately the size of the wavelength of light, which opens up all this physics that hasn't been accessible to capture the waves in the wavelength of light, not just the intensity. And that sort of goes into what I did in my early career, which is called holography, but really it's like recording both the phase. And phase is like whether you're at the peak of the wave or the trough of the wave or in between, and the intensity. And mathematically, it just gives you a ton more information. And with that, what we are able to do is mathematically, if I don't have a laser pointer here, but if you take like even, oh, I have cell phone. Oh, here's the demo.
And just to hit again, the goal here is what Openwater is building is something that has the resolution, the imaging ability of an MRI machine 1,000 times cheaper. And then if you were going to say size-wise, how much smaller?
Fit in a cell phone or ski hat. So here's the basic idea. You can see red light goes through my hand, but it scatters.
Yes.
And so this thing with recording the thing I mentioned, phase,
yes,
the pixel sizes, enables us to mathematically descatter that light.
So
that in 4 years.
Let's tell this a little bit. So you are using red laser light, and that frequency of light goes through skin, goes through bone, goes through brain.
Yeah, because bone is white. White scatters light. Basic, like a crash course in optics, like my shirt is a little bit white. The white reflects light, the black absorbs it. That's why it's black.
Yes.
Bone is white. It reflects or really scatters the light. And so then we descatter it. We don't lose the light. It just goes everywhere. So you don't think you can get a good crisp image. It's a bit like, for scattering, like if I took my glasses and put sandpaper on it, I wouldn't be able to see well because of the scattering. But mathematically, we can descatter if we record the phase.
The information is still there. It can be reassembled.
Yes.
And so you're using something as simple as red laser light, which you talked about, these little red laser diodes.
Yes.
To manufacture. And because they're going to be manufactured in probably billions per year, the cost is so low.
Right.
Is doing low.
Although we're using a new kind of laser, and that's been a problem. Like a year ago, I thought the laser would be cheap. A year ago, and thank you for investing, it was a 4x8 size, and it cost $100,000. And we're like, this is existential for the company. But now here we are, a year later, we figured it out. Our laser size is now that, although our backup laser size for prototyping is about that size. But it's been hard because we had to develop new components that meet new kinds of spec.
But you know where it's going. You have a trajectory, right? I mean, this is what I talk about all the time. It's skate to where the puck is going to be. Right. You can see where these technologies are converging to create something that's extraordinary. Maybe it isn't today, but a year or 2 years from now, you'll have something, and then every year improving thereafter. I mean, it's the law. You're hitting the law. You're hitting boundary conditions and laws of physics, is what you're.
Well, yeah, we did, and then we were able to accelerate. Honestly, we were stuck a year ago and so we basically put out RFPs for like every laser company in the world. And so we had thousands of laser engineers answering this, sourcing the solutions. Nobody really came up with it. We end up coming up with it ourselves from that. So, got a few companies going off on a couple different projects, and actually evolved that way, and have settled on some work we discussed earlier. But yeah, so you get stuck like that. You start out with this big vision, you get stuck in like camera chip, that ended up being easy. Ultrasonic chip, a little harder, but the laser was this big, hard, hairy problem that we've walked through now to be able to say, yes, even if we start clinical trials with a laser that size, we have the lasers in-house doing this with almost the quality we need, and we're in development to perfect that right now at relatively low risk. And then it goes on a silicon wafer for mass production. If you can get something on a silicon wafer for mass production, you get to use the $1 trillion manufacturing supply chain. So once you get to volume, that thing is a function of how much silicon area you use and the processing cost per wafer, which is knowable. Early volume mass production, you know, like if you're shipping 100 units, the costs are elsewhere. It's support.
So Mary Lou, so cameras got it, red laser lights. How does the ultrasound play into this?
The ultrasound changes the color of the light ever so slightly. Just the same way like the pitch of a police car siren changes as it speeds past you. It's called Doppler shift. Mm-hmm. You know the sound, right? Like if you imagine hearing an ambulance or a police car going by you on the sidewalk. It's just, we do that with the actual color of light. And so that's what makes the laser so hard, is we need it to be a very precise color of light so that we can detect the shift from the ultrasound, and we have to pulse it. and so that ends up being hard with at the right color that goes through your body, because there's a window where your body is transparent or translucent to light. And that window is basically the color of a campfire. And that's why you get warmed by the campfire. That's sort of so it's called the infrared window. Campfire light or fire is, you know, it's very key to our evolution. So it warms us, and that goes through. And so it has to be the right color, precise. They call it coherence. So all the waves have to be.
And we have to add one more thing, which is massive computational power.
Oh yeah, but that's free. Oh, and then of course the tools of our time, machine learning and AI, because we'll have more images than everybody else combined with success pretty quickly. And so we'll use that to start to see the patterns earlier that you discussed earlier. You said, I wrote it down, proactive, predictive, and personalized, right? To enable that with your body and what's normal for you.
To give a person an idea of what this potentially means at home. So I get we're not going to a hospital. We could go to a CVS or a big box store to go get scanned and so forth. The potential, one of the ideas that I remember you talked about, and it stuck with me, is if a woman once a year wants to get a mammogram, you could send her in the box a device, which is sort of a bra-like device that she puts on, push a button, and the data gets sent over the cloud, and then you ship the thing back, and that's been your mammogram.
Right. Or any body part. Like if both your parents died of, I don't know, let's pick like liver cancer. Like, don't you want to scan your liver more? Because you might have the genes. You probably have the genes. Yeah. Or a pillow, like for your head, that does a scan at night, for example. Especially key if you've got, you know, any kind of brain disease, be it mental disease, neurodegenerative, autism, you name it. Like, what can you do to change that trend? Let's take it a step
further, right? Because I think one of the things I think about, and I've been searching for companies to invest in this, which is for skin cancer, when you're in the shower in the morning, naked, taking a shower, there should be imaging systems that are looking at the patterns of moles and freckles and things on your body, detect something at the very beginning.
Right.
But you could imagine putting open water technology in a bed, and as you sleep, it's just imaging you.
Right. And just you toss and turn, the software figures that out, accelerometers, whatever, right?
Pretty easy.
Why not? Especially if you are suffering from something chronic or you are in treatment, you want to know, is it getting better or worse, particularly?
And just for everybody here, the idea is that the cost is so low, the size is so small that you're constantly being monitored, right? So I'm a pilot, I fly a few different airplanes, I have a Model S and Model X. I love those cars. And there's thousands of sensors and thousands of processors imaging everything or understanding the state of everything all the time. But I like to joke and say, for most of us, our refrigerators are better wired than we are, right? And so the goal is find something at stage 0 and fix it instantly. So this is the kind of technology that I'm so thrilled about which is going to become ubiquitous in our lives, in our homes, which makes healthcare, for the first time ever, truly be healthcare versus sick care.
And we can do surgery too without the knife, even in your bed, with
That's
high intensity focused ultrasound, because we're already focusing these ultrasonic pings to change the color of the light. There's a whole field of this called focused ultrasound to
I
fix
know about it
broken bones,
in the
do
brain. Yeah,
any kind of cancer, open the blood-brain barrier. Yeah, all kinds of surgeries like that, like where you don't have to, I mean, the reason it's expensive, like, okay, think of, okay, COVID in the surgical theater, but yeah, if you don't have to open up the body, why do that? Open heart surgery without,
crazy,
going in.
crazy. And so ultimately, I want to wake up in the morning and say to my AI, to Jarvis, "Good morning, Jarvis. Hey, Peter, while you were asleep, I made a few repairs." Why not? I mean, this is the vision
Yeah,
where we're going.
all that cholesterol, not that you, no, just talking to me, I had eggs or whatever, right? So, right, or that glass of wine, what it
Um,
did on my liver.
so how far are we from having this kind of capability um, in the home in some level?
It's a good question, because I mean,
Best guesses. Range. Give me a range.
I mean, we could accelerate and probably put something this year, or sorry, next year, into the home and clinical trials, or a limited trial, or in fact a large foundation called up and it's like, let's get you into 5 big box stores by the end of next year for a trial. If we did the big box store, we're
Amazing.
looking at ambulance first, and we're just trying to decide first product right now. Ambulance has perhaps a better way to prove it for clinical trials, FDA, and all of that. And
Yeah.
so we're just sort of debating that question of what to go for first product. But what we'd like to do is enable a lot of this stuff, proving it end to end, and then we're a startup, we can only grow so fast. So prove it end to end, and then collaborate with other companies to accelerate this in different instantiations of this.
By the way, Mary Lou, I'm bringing a group of 24 of my Abundance members. We have a longevity and vitality platinum trip I'm doing in August and September in the Bay Area and in San Diego.
Oh, cool.
I should really have you address them because they're all potential investors and such.
Yeah,
And
that sounds fun.
it'd be good timing.
Even just the free critique is really useful.
Yeah. What kind of tech are you able to show people today who visit your lab?
We have these rapid prototyping setups. We had been trying to do a prototype, and really what happened at the beginning of this year is we had a breakthrough that gave, and we've had like this, we had a breakthrough every other month this year that gave a 10x improvement on some thing. And so we stopped with the prototypes, we enabled that, and now we're in the process of building a brain scan sub prototype that can then be put around into a helmet or put into the body. And so that will probably be ready in mid Q3. So in about a month and a half. And then we're scaling that up for the end of the year to a helmet size that can also do. So that, I guess that answers the question. What we have is larger setups that are not portable, but allow us to make changes very quickly to improve the performance. Just historically, so started the company a few years back, got some money to build the components, put the components together last January 2019. Did our first scan, got absolutely nothing. We spent an entire Q1 then going back, almost like in Karate Kid. Like, we decided to scan this homogeneous mass of optically and ultrasonically mimicking It was like
Right.
a gel,
Right.
until we got nothing. And so that took a quarter to just get nothing. Then we threw 2 toothpicks in it and we got the toothpicks. That was like last April. And since then, we've like kept refining and refining, and now we have the images you'll see on our website. I wish it had gone easier. I'm just telling the truth. Like it's how you have to do it sometimes. But so that's why we're not at prototype, because we keep refining our image reconstruction algorithms and scanning algorithms and componentry and so forth and so forth to make these radical improvements in depth and scan speed in image contrast. But we're at the point where what we have is a lot of physicians saying, hey, this is good enough, could you ship something, people are dying, we could save people's lives. And so we think, okay, it's time.
Yeah, the ability to put the sensors in the home, in the environment, that allows then AI to do the analysis and the doctor then to look at the analysis and make a legal diagnosis.
Right, like even the teledocs, because most doctors are now doing just teleconsults. They just say, I'd love for my, we talked about this before the call, I'd love for my patient just to be able to scan themselves while they were on the call with me, because they can't do it, and it would just make that richer. So that's even an avenue that's more straightforward. Although when you're looking at images, computers really are better at recognizing subtle changes in images than people, even really trained radiologists. And so that it's obvious that that also can scale out with the tools of our time, machine learning and AI and all that. So how do we accelerate that? So we're finally, I think, at the image quality that is game-changing for many medical conditions. And so it's time. So our goal is to get into production at the end of next year. Walk through get clinical trial ready prototype, safe for humans, tested and all that, end of this year. Walk through the clinical trials, tweak it, and then that's our audacious goal. We use the word audacious too, for the end of next year. Can we go fast? Then I tell that to various people. I'm like, well, what would it take to go faster? So this is the nice thing. It's like blank check. How fast can you go to make impact for saving people's lives? So that's the challenge.
I'm excited to help bring capital to you, Mary Lou, and so please, I will continue to bring investors, and because I just love what you're doing. It's transformative in so many different ways. So let's start at the other side of the equation. I think when I first heard you speaking about this technology, I was like, no, that's not possible. That's insane. No, come on, stop pulling my chain.
Well, I would have done time travel if I could have figured that one out, but I can't figure out the physics.
So, by the way, to everybody, get your questions ready. We're going to be going to questions in just another 5-7 minutes, but the pièce de resistance is, my French is terrible, but is you actually are able to potentially or actually use this technology to read and write on the brain?
Yes, as has been shown by great neuroscientists now for about 15 years, using graduate students laying in MRI machines.
The ultimate lab rat. Graduate
yeah,
students.
Hundreds of hours, either listening to podcasts or watching videos, and the recordings of their minds being made or their brains reacting to this, and then using that big data analysis to infer what the student is looking at or what they're hearing. And there's a huge body of work on this, just using something MRI can detect in its video mode. It's called functional MRI, which is where oxygen is being used in your brain and where it isn't, in about 10 cubic millimeter cubes, about 1,200 pixels or voxels, which is a 3D, because your brain is 3D. And looking at that with hundreds of hours of data allow you to infer what image somebody's thinking of, what words they're about to say. And I saw that work because I had not really I didn't realize the brain mapping people. I thought it was not real too. And I saw that work, I don't know, about less than a decade ago, I think in 2012.
I remember it's like in an fMRI machine and being able to like record your dreams or your thoughts and
Yeah,
see something that looks like a ghostly image of a dog catching a ball and say,
a Japanese group did that a few
yeah,
years ago. Yeah, it's
great.
incredible. And so I saw that. I'm like, we just got to up the resolution, make it more comfortable. And it's the next communication medium. Like, and it's like, it's how, language and reading and all of that, like it's how we think. And as scary as that might be, like from an ethical perspective, we could say, okay, we don't want to know how the brain works, totally uninterested. Like, okay, like a culture, a country could decide that, but it's hard to imagine that going on for a while. And then there's this other thing is we're not the only thing on planets that have brains. So we might be able to communicate better with like dogs who can smell coronavirus or, different things. So anyway, it's really profound what it could do, but then there's also a lot of privacy things or just even cultural civilization things, like, do I look fat in that dress? Like whatever, these small things that we say culturally, like, are we being truthful? Does that matter? Apparently we each hear about 20 different lies a day. Not that any of us are lying, but part of it is, you go over your friend's house for dinner and their mother makes dinner and you're like, wow, this is fabulous. Can I have the recipe? When really it was okay, but you don't want to say it was just okay because that seems rude, right? And so anyway, I think there's issues like that, but it can help profoundly people with brain disease, and it can help creatives as a way to dump the images out of your head or dump the music out of your head.
I want to go for 1 minute. So how does what you're doing work for reading and writing on Neuron? What are you doing?
So I showed on stage at a conference that we could read and write the neuron state.
So you use red laser light to excite or read?
We can, and we were doing reading because what happens before an electrical pulse goes down a neuron is with the calcium channels, what happens is the membrane starts to roughen. And when a membrane roughens, it scatters. And we can see that differential scattering, neuron per neuron. And so it's possible for us to do that. We'd have to scan all the neurons or a section in your speech center, because it becomes what we call in engineering a multiplexing issue. Like, how many points do you scan all at the same time, right? Because you got like a millisecond, that's a thousandth of a second. So how much do you have to do in that in terms of volume? So it becomes this engineering problem with what we're doing. That's a bunch of time. So you're focused mostly right now on doing millimeter resolution, not micron resolution, which is I guess 5-10 microns gets you the small dimension of a neuron, where we can see that and showed that we can see that. So yes, we can do that, and we can also change the state of a neuron as we understand. I used to talk to the fantastic Paul Allen, co-founder of Intel, about this, and at TED, and he just said, but you don't understand, there's 5 Nobel Prizes just to understand how a neuron works. And I'm like, great, Paul, go get those Nobel Prizes. Meanwhile, we'll be reading and writing them. But, there's a lot of ethical issues, and if you don't understand what you're doing, so we have held off on that, but we have that technology that we could employ and develop.
And is this 5 years away, 10 years away, to be able to read and write on neurons?
We could preferentially accelerate it. Like, I have
right. Anybody with a huge checkbook watching this webinar, if you want to write Mary Lou Jepsen, just get a hold of me. I'll connect
we
you.
Totally could do it. I mean, I think the first postdoc I hired had grown neurons in the petri dishes for her postdoc, and shown that the optical properties were there, and so we tested and
amazing. I think it's going to put lawyers out of business. All right, we're going to go to questions. I'm going to ask the first question. Are you tracking what Elon is doing with Neuralink?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. The good progress. Here's my comeback. Like, I think Elon, he's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. He's gotten everybody excited about this. Literally, my investors, a month before he announced it, stopped talking about brain-computer interface. A month later, they're like, "What are we doing?" I'm like, "You told me to stop." So thank you, Elon. But I've had non-elective brain surgery, hardest thing I did in my entire life. I'm fine. It was 25 years ago. I finished my PhD afterwards. I was still smart. But I don't see scale in requiring elective brain surgery. If I've got full-blown Parkinson's, bring it on, whatever it is. And so I think that there's a scale problem with elective brain surgery in the near term for products. So it's not even just the privacy issues of never being off. It's also how long something lasts in inserted brain, and the longest that has been shown is a number of months. So you would need to do this every couple of months. And when something goes in, you kill the material, the neurons.
And the beautiful thing about what you're doing is you're putting in photons.
Right, which are actually therapeutic. And so photons and ultrasound. So it's non-invasive. It doesn't require that. Although they're working on those problems. He's got a great team, and he's the prolific, one of the most prolific people of our time in terms of bringing the impossible to reality. So yeah, we're open to doing whatever we can do to help them. And
we have plenty of questions. Let's jump in, Jerem.
Sure. So our first question is from Marino, who watched your A360 keynote from the last couple of years. And he's just wondering why red light is the right color for these types of, machines. What does red light do that other waves of light can't do?
It's a really good question. Believe it or not, it goes through your body. Like if even when I turned off my cell phone because it was beeping, I was trying to be respectful. But if you turn on your cell phone light on the back of it and you put your finger over it, it's white light there. But the thing that goes through that you can see is red. And it's also infrared. It's just our eyes can't see the infrared. So if you take an infrared camera, you'll notice the infrared's even brighter. That's sort of like what the guy wore in Silence of the Lambs to I don't know. Sorry, that's too macabre. What a military wears to try to see and to get night vision. They have so that's why, because your body is translucent to it.
Yeah. Next question, Jerem.
Yeah. So a follow-up in the similar vein is from Kelly. And she's asking how long it takes to complete a brain scan, and are there any complications associated with the brain scan with this red light imagery?
Good question. So the units that we're making now, we're going for what we call a voxel, which is a 3D pixel. So 1,000 voxels a second per module. So what that means in real life is a 4 by 4 by 4 inch cube in about 15 minutes per module. That's what we're shooting for. We should be able to go 100 times faster, but what we've painfully experienced as engineers is, like, you say, do this at this time, and then you didn't make that chip, and so they put in a few microseconds delay, and you're pulling your hair out to debug it. But so we're going to walk to the 100x faster. So, but in the sense of detecting a stroke and just blood flow, our target is to do that in 1 minute to detect whether a stroke has occurred, because you have a time to brain issue. But for a full structural scan of that, or body, about a 15-minute scan is what we're shooting for the end of this year. And then we will walk forward to, I think, the limits of a module from a physics perspective are 100x more than that. So if you think about that, 1.5 minutes to 10x down from 1.5 minutes. So it keeps going down. So that would be 90 seconds or 9 seconds. You could do that amount in 9 seconds from a physics perspective. But we don't think 9 seconds versus 90 seconds is even 90 seconds doesn't seem key. Somebody could probably sit for 15 if we could ship it faster, and that's how we're making that decision.
Great.
Fascinating. Great. So Kelly actually has a lot of questions on here, so we'll do a couple more of hers. She comments that the applications for stroke and brain tumor imaging are incredible. How do you envision this tool being applied to chronic neurodegenerative diseases like multiple sclerosis, ALS, Alzheimer's, dementia, etc.?
Well, we think it's going to be important to understand them, and what I can share is a slightly different brain disease, depression, which is also a big thing. 2 years ago, 1,200 fMRI scans. That's the thing that measures the oxygen use that I mentioned, that also enables you to
Image.
do brain-computer interface, were pooled to see if there were patterns of depression. And so 5 hospitals actually shared their medical imaging data and published a paper together. And they showed, in fact, there is an objective measure of depression, not just a subjective measure. What I mean by that is DSM. You answer a litany of questions. Basically, are you sleeping all the time? Have you gained weight? Do you have thoughts of suicide? If you answer yes to those questions and a litany of others, you are defined as clinically depressed until you answer no to those questions. So that's what I mean by subjective. That if we can look at the patterns in your brain, then we can see how various therapies are working or not working earlier. We probably all have had friends who were depressed, who tried a pill and it made it worse. I had a friend in college that nearly killed themselves because they were on the wrong and how do you flip, because it takes 2 weeks. And so how can you see these trends earlier to see what therapy is working? It be talk therapy, whatever it is, and move to an objective measure. And what's needed for that is a lower cost, more frequent scan, according to the data that's been presented. Although there was we think that has analog in Parkinson's. Clearly, we know that the tremors and the deep brain stimulation helps with that. We can do that by focusing the ultrasound at a higher intensity, as is being done, as is FDA approved for Parkinson's. What else did you ask? Alzheimer's. So there's a lot that's shown in Alzheimer's of using the infrared light at 40 hertz through the eye, because that's a transparent eye, that decreases symptoms of Alzheimer's in lab animals. And this is work done at MIT, and I don't know how far they are in the spectrum of getting it into humans, but obviously we could go beyond eye and go for all the neurons with this technology. As that is proved out by that fantastic group. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. I think she's at the McGovern Institute at MIT, one of the pioneers of that. I'm sure there are several others. But I think that the main issue in brain is it's really hard to get into. It's really hard to biopsy. And it's actually hard to get biomarkers out of it because of the blood-brain barrier. And so our technology addresses all of those, including opening the blood-brain barrier to be able to pull biomarkers out and to get medication in places that are localized. And there's a whole bunch of people working on this area, so not just us.
Very cool. One more question from Kelly. Like I said, she's got a lot. How do you plan to drive physician adoption in a field that's often resistant to new technology? And how do you envision navigating the reimbursement and payer landscape when this technology becomes applied to the medical field?
Really good questions. It's funny, I used to joke, like, if we think of the US, they're not the most open to innovation in healthcare globally. but you know what? They have become pretty open through this awful global pandemic. All healthcare systems have. And a lot of hospitals are about to go out of business because they can't make money. And so we're in this big moment of change so you have step in these huge foundations who are saying, hey, what can we do to accelerate healthcare no longer being 18% of the economy of the United States and deliver better healthcare in the process? So physician adaptation, I mean, we're getting them pulling. So that my secret is, like, the future the future belongs to those who want it. So those people that don't want it, fine, like, let's just pull in and be proactive on the physicians that are, and there are many of them. And so you ask physicians, and then also reimbursement. It's so interesting, reimbursement and the codes. And I think you just break it open, like a certificate of need. You have to show a certificate of need to get a new scanner. That takes 2 years. Wow. So that's like structural. So from a regulatory and structural point of view, blocks new scanners from going in. Meanwhile, like scanners, that's the profit center for hospitals. So seriously, they make 80% gross margin on the scans. And so I think the question isn't to go head to head. It's sort of like cell phones beat landlines and went to Asia first. Like, go to the edge. the most dangerous place you can go right now is the hospital. Seriously. I mean, it's not funny. It is the most dangerous place you can go, and has been for some time. It's just more apparent to us. And so we're looking to go at the periphery. Like, how do you enhance the minute clinics, or pick the local solution? We're back to groups doing house calls of doctors. And so we're working with those groups, but we're also working with hospitals, particularly on stroke, because here's this case on stroke. Like, we can see stroke. It seems we're seeing stroke in animals right now. We haven't seen a stroke in humans. We're doing animals first. We hope to do a human this year. Ambulance comes on the scene. EMT is there. Has the patient fallen? Is the patient drunk? Or has the patient had a stroke? EMT has a 50-50 chance of getting that right. That patient has 4 hours time to brain. Leading cause of disability in the US because the stroke isn't diagnosed at the initial point of contact. So by law in most states, the ambulance has to go to the closest hospital. And then they go into trauma. Well, we all know the stabbing victims, the gunshot victims get to go first because it's apparent what they have. But the person with a stroke has 4 hours until they're brain dead. But it's not known if they're drunk or not, or on some substance, or just has some other issue. So if you could figure out if there was a stroke, you could get that patient to the stroke unit, the proper stroke unit. It turns out if it's got deep vessel occlusion, it's different than a less vessel or bleed type stroke. You could direct them. And so that's something where there is no solution, where we can rapidly get into what was last year the #2 cause of death in the United States, or sorry, #2 cause of death worldwide, #4 in the US. Next year, this year it'll be third, and because of coronavirus. But it's the #1 most expensive cause of disability, because you don't go back to your job afterwards because you don't have that part of your brain anymore. It's seriously debilitating. So that's one approach to get through reimbursement and go mainstream. Because we do want to get all the research done and enable, people studying the corner cases of how we can use it. But again, we're deciding on what we should do for first product, but that's the argument for that one.
Great. So on that same topic then of kind of the bureaucracy behind healthcare, Edward is asking whether there is FDA certification process, et cetera, and what would be required for exponential tech to actually advance at a rate that's acceptable. He pretty much is asking you if you could create an entirely new system from scratch with current technology in mind, how would you do it?
Oh, for FDA? Or just our thing?
FDA certification, new technology being used from invention to hospital. Like, what does that process look like ideally?
Well, in medical imaging, it's actually not that hard for the past 25 years, and mostly because you just have to prove it's safe for humans. So for us, there's 100 years of predicate product using light in the body and 50 years of ultrasound in the body. We know the safety limits. And then we have to prove it makes a repeatable image. We don't have to prove what the image means to start. And that's, and in fact, most of the medical imaging companies continue on that. So it's relatively simple until you start to say, that's a tumor, that's a stroke. But if you let the doctors do that and prove that in clinical, at least you're starting and you get in and you scale. And where we're picking is where, for example, stroke therapy, the standard of care for stroke was changed 2 years ago with a single paper, one paper. One paper showed, I said you had 4 hours. It turns out there's a condition with a different type of imaging that you can see whether that brain is dead or dying. They call it penumbra, sort of like a shadow rather than dead. And so if that is penumbra, dying, what you want to do is get that patient as soon as possible to a special care facility where you bust the clot and jack the blood pressure up to 200/150 and oxygenate the crap out of those neurons so they get to live. One paper changed that. It's amazing because the other solution is brain death. And so we're trying to go for areas like that while enabling patients. So the cost structure for our thing really is the game changer, but you only get to access that cost when you're shipping at volume. And so you have to figure out how to get to volume when there is no volume. I mean, Butterfly Networks showed it. Butterfly Networks is a $2,000 ultrasound attachment to the iPhone. It's not that great resolution. They're doing something better now, but they got on in about a year and a half ago. The number of ultrasound units that sold worldwide every year was, let it be 75,000. I don't remember the exact numbers. Within the first 6 months of production, they had orders for 150,000 units, double the entire worldwide total available market. They showed like, wow, if it's easy to use and it's low cost, more people will buy it. You have, the amazing Eric Topol, who got rid of his stethoscope years ago and moved to ultrasound. He's a famous cardiologist who writes these incredible books. But, he talks about how long it took the stethoscope to be introduced in the early 1800s. And people thought it was a really bad idea for 20 years before it became the symbol of a doctor, having the stethoscope. So adaptation rate is usually related to what med students learn during med school. So you have this 20-year lag. So we have to change that. And I think it's called we care about our bodies and our health as well. So I am answering both. Like, I think we have to go mainstream and then also enable people that are hungry for it.
Nice. Jerome.
Sure. Up next is Rick. And he is wondering how you think tinkerers and entrepreneurs will use your new device in new, unexpected ways. What crazy mods and new things can you imagine as we see this paradigm shift happen? What unexpected results will come of this technology?
It's interesting. I mean, I think if I could imagine it, we would try to do it. And so I'm interested to see what they do. But then also, because this technology has the ability to read your thoughts in grainy versions now. I think there's some profound constraints we might wish to work under and sort of figuring out what that is. I mean, I think it'll be grainy for a while and then all of a sudden it'll get good and people will say, hey, what happened? And so if we lay that groundwork now in releasing those, I think that's the one thing that keeps me up at night. How people will use it. I think a lot of this stuff is obvious, embedding it into lots of, in your shower, in your bed, in your clothes, in your ski cap, and all of those things. But I think the interesting, I don't know how people, I mean, also like controlling limbs, making new limbs, and, controlling, a lot of different things. I think one of the biggest apps, and this is, I joked for a while, I'm not serious, but it's funny, Peter's one of my investors. The biggest money maker, I think people would pay anything to talk to their dogs, anything. But we're not doing it for first product, but
or at least to know when their dog is hungry and needs to go to the bathroom, or just some basic stuff. But I talk a lot about, in the final result, being able to communicate emotions person to person. The highest level of empathy and intimacy is going to come where our brains are connected, and I truly understand how you're feeling, what you're thinking.
Dating.
Yes.
Do you want to know what they're thinking?
Oh, well, I mean, listen, if you want the ultimate intimate relationship, it doesn't get more intimate than knowing a person's actual thoughts.
Yeah, I agree.
But getting rid of lawyers.
That's great.
Yeah, and talk about, ultimately, are you guilty? Yes or no? Well, getting rid of lying. Though there are phantom implantable memories as well, which will be interesting. But a lot of interesting implications. I did want at one point to do a lie detector X Prize.
Nice.
Yeah. Jerome.
Sure. On that same vein, Enrique is curious about both of your favorite useful application of BCI. What excites you most about the future of BCI, and how are you helping create that future?
Telepathy, extreme honesty. My way of supporting this future of BCI is investing in Mary Lou. and being a fan and writing about it. What's your favorite? If you had full on real high bandwidth BCI, what are your thoughts? Where would you go with it?
I just think it changes relationships, right? It does get to this radical honesty because you can't hide it. Although they'll be tokenized and you can segment different parts of your brain as we start to understand. But it'll be flawed. The young people do it first, and they shared too much, and I think all of that. So that's my favorite use. Is it changes how we interact as not just a species, but as all things with brains. And
it's like creating when language first came online.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, can you imagine when language first came on, you could actually express yourself, how that changed things?
Yeah.
Great.
Share your dreams and yeah, I mean, just even for me, like as a personal creator, I think in images. So I would just love, I could just if I could just I spent most of my career with people that don't speak the same language as me in rooms mostly in Asia. And so my solution as an engineer was to get on the whiteboard, do drawings and math, and then get somebody on the other side with the drawings and math. And then everybody would say, no, you got the sign wrong, or what, SIGN, plus or minus, or whatever. And then I knew we were good. We were going to find a solution. But if we could I just wish I could go and just image would be there just from a work thing. But that's not the big impact. The big impact is changing how we communicate fundamentally.
I mean, ultimately, there's nothing more valuable to society, to a country, to a person, to a family, than intelligence, right? Human intelligence is the most extraordinary thing. And so being able to, Ray Kurzweil's talked about for some time, his prediction for high bandwidth BCI is early 2030s. Maybe it will be open water technology. He had presumed nanobots in the bloodstream. But what wouldn't you pay for increasing your level of intelligence? It's extraordinary.
And figuring out where you can add value, the different types of creativity, right, that we all have. Like, how are our brains wired? Where can we see, and where can we enhance by reading and learning in certain areas? Sometimes you stumble on. I've been in classes that were pretty dry and boring and inaccessible, right? And could you just dump the books in your brain too? And just could I just learn whatever it is, Maxwell's equations or Navi? I'm just picking some.
I saw this movie. It's called The Matrix.
Oh, okay, yeah, right. So, could we do that? But I think initially as a rough. Can you imagine if you're a creative to be able to do a rough cut by dumping your dream of what you had directly to videotape, or a rough cut of the music track you have in your head rather than having to play it? It will allow you to so much more rapidly innovate with even before we get to the full high bandwidth, even with a lower fidelity system to get a rough cut. Yeah. Could be really powerful.
Amazing. Well, everybody, listen, I want to just thank you, Mary Lou, for joining. A pleasure. I'm super excited. I'm going to follow up with you about having you come and speak to the group of investors and philanthropists we're assembling, because I love what you're building and what you're doing. It's extraordinary. For everybody, we're going to be going to Zoom breakout rooms right after this, and Jerem will take you there on Monday. What day of the week is today? Today's Friday. I'm lost in space and time. On Monday at 10 a.m., Rick Smith, who's a friend. Rick is the inventor of the taser, or actually the CEO of Axon, commercialized the taser. So we'll talk about, in this time of civil unrest, or where people talk about defunding police forces and so forth, and gun violence. Let's talk about technology that can play a role in the world we're living in now. We'll go behind the scenes with Rick and talk about the taser. We'll talk about the work he's doing with cameras. His company, Axon, besides creating the taser, also creates body cams for the police forces. Imagine body cams that were, had AI analyze pictures, but imagine if a officer is getting angry or upset, blood pressure rising? How do we use data to keep everybody safe and everybody performing within the bounds of law and civic duty? So 10 a.m. on Monday. Mary Lou, I can't wait to do my first brain scan with you. It'll be painless.
It'll be great.
Yeah, I'm gonna be a graduate student. I'm gonna come in as a guinea pig.
That'd be great. We welcome anytime. Yeah, I'm excited to see you in August. And thank you. It's been fun to
yeah, absolutely.
riff and talk. And thanks for the excellent questions too.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Jerem, over to you for our Zoom breakouts, and everybody have a fantastic weekend. I think that's what they call Saturday and Sunday these days. All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.